Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Hello, thank you for joining me for this book review. Today, we're looking at this book. It's called Al-Hadith, and this is an old edition that I have. The title is spelled with an S at the end, but new editions are spelled with a TH, Hadith. This is a very important book. I'll explain why. It's written by Al-Hajj Maulana Fazalul Karim, who is an important scholar from the Indo-Pak subcontinent. And he compiled this book as a new edition of an old book that is called Mishkat ul-Masabih. Mishkat ul-Masabih, which means something like the niche of lamps. And this is a title of a book that is a collection of hadith. So after we look at the Quran and we look at the life example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we get a broad understanding of what the Prophet, peace be upon him, was up to, what he was doing, where he was going, what he was teaching, and so on. Now we want to get to the specifics. So how do we get to the specifics? That's in the hadith, the little snippets of information about what the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, what he did, or what might have happened in his presence, and he did not object to it, so that becomes precedent for Islamic law. So the book Mishkat ul-Masabih is a unique collection. Why is it different? You've heard the names Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah. These are collectors of hadith, and these persons have collected their hadiths and put them into massive tomes. So we have al-Bukhari, for example, in 9 volumes in the Arabic-English translation, and Imam Muslim's collection in 4 volumes just in pure English alone. And if we add Arabic to it, then we get that in 8 volumes. So these are massive works. So how is the average Muslim going to fathom all of this? How are you going to read all of these books and then make sense of them? So what this book has done is to bring all the hadiths from those various books into this one source. But of course, this too becomes a massive book, and this is only one of 4 volumes. But still, this is more manageable than to read 9 volumes of Bukhari, and then another 8 volumes of Muslim, and then several volumes of the other ones as well. So rather than going to all of those volumes, we have them all in one convenient package. But more than this, the author has taken pains to draw from those various collections the hadiths dealing with specific topics, and has given us a very nice outline of topics. And this has proven to be very convenient for me. Like if I want to give a sermon on a certain topic, I would go look up the topic in this book. For example, I want to talk about kindness and oppression. I want to talk about education, about principles of interpretation, about preaching and admonition. I want to talk about, the problem with doing things for showing others. I want to talk about hypocrisy as a problem. I want to talk about patience, especially as we come to Ramadan and we're talking about fasting and the patience that's needed while we're fasting. So all of these are here, listed topically. So I can just go to the relevant page and I find a number of hadiths there from the various other books dealing with that subject. So I don't have to go hunt into the other books. And, very important topics like, our duty towards orphans, towards the poor and the distressed, our duty to nurse and visit the sick, the unity of Muslims. What about our duty towards juniors and seniors, towards our neighbors? Our duty to parents, our duty to children, our duties to our spouses, and towards our family members and relatives. All of that is listed. So we just go to the relevant page and we find that information there in a nutshell for us. In addition to giving us the hadiths, which we can find in Bukhari and Muslim with a little bit more work, the author in each chapter has given us his own summary of that information, so that sometimes we might be reading the hadith and we're a little bit lost, we don't understand the hadith, or we don't know how that ties in with other hadiths on the subject. How do we bring all of those hadiths into a comprehensive whole and distill the teachings from those hadiths? So what he has done for us is that at the beginning of each chapter, he gives us his own explanation. And his explanations would come from those hadiths, but also would come from the Quran and from general Islamic principles. So, for example, in his section dealing with Islam and Muslim, so he would ask, what is Islam? And then he gives us the detailed explanation of that, the object of Islam, and so on. Peace with creation as one of the aspects of Islam. And then after all of that explanation, that is when eventually we will come to the hadiths themselves, which are given both in Arabic and English side by side. And then by looking at the hadith, after getting that long explanation, we are now in a better position to understand those hadiths because the scholar has already given us that summarized information, has already spoon-fed us in a way, and that is good for a beginner. We don't, when we get to an advanced stage, we don't want anybody else to tell us what the hadith is going to tell us. We want to go to the hadith itself and analyze it for ourselves with a critical mind and capable judgment. But initially, because we are beginners, we want to get that training wheels. We want to get the training wheels provided to us by a scholar. We want the scholar to hold our hands and walk us through this conglomerate of hadiths so that we're not lost in trying to read them. Now, this has, as I said, proven to be an essential work for me especially. I find myself going back to it again and again to get the information. If I'm preparing for a sermon, I'm preparing for a TV show or whatever, and we're going to talk about a certain subject, this is one of my chief resources. Is there anything that I don't like about it? Well, one important consideration here is that there is very little discussion of the authenticity of specific hadith narratives. There's only a general sort of consideration at the beginning of the book to prime us for the fact that not all hadiths are authentic. And we have to use some critical judgments. For example, a hadith may not make sense. What do you do with that? Well, you leave that alone for the time being because you don't want to confuse yourself by relying on a hadith that makes no sense. What if a hadith is contrary to the Quran? He says, well, you have to go with the Quran and not with the hadith in that particular case. But sometimes it's not so easy to form a judgment, and you would have hoped that with each hadith there is a sort of indication as to whether this one is a genuine one. But alas, that sort of indication is hardly there. And more than that, not only has the scholar taken hadiths from the books which are most authentic, like Bukhari and Muslim, but has also taken from other books which are lesser known, like Bayhaqi and Razin and Sharh Sunnah, and so on. So if the hadiths are taken from those books, the authenticity is probably questionable, and one has to be careful about that. So how would I recommend that you use this book? When you go to each chapter, read the explanation from the scholar, because those are usually very good explanations. That's even before you get to the hadith. You may not need to get to the hadith, but by following the explanation in which the scholar will refer to the hadith by number, then if you're interested in looking up that hadith, you can go look up that particular hadith. Now, when you go to the hadith section itself and you're looking at the hadith, you see the Arabic on one side, the English on the other side, you're looking at that. See where the hadith is from. So if it says that this one is from Bukhari, for example, then you know, okay, that one is probably more reliable than the ones which are said to be from Razin or Sharh Sunnah. So you take the more reliable ones and don't place your reliance on the ones which come from the more obscure works. So altogether, this is a book that has actually changed my life. And I've been reading this book since I was 14 years old. Can you believe that? Not this particular edition. And I'm still reading it. And I hope that this book will have an impact on you as well. Perhaps it will even change your life. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ali. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. My dear friends, I want to appeal to you to support the important work we're doing this Ramadan. Visit QuranSpeaks.com and click Donate. May God reward you for your generosity, and may you have a blessed Ramadan.